The views reflected by any of the guests may not reflect the views of the podcast host. Some topics may be difficult for some listeners. Proceed at your own risk. This podcast does not replace psychotherapy or advice and is for entertainment purposes only. Welcome to Hopeology. I'm your host, Christina McKelvey. Today we are going to be speaking with Zak Mucha. He is the author of the book Swimming to the Horizon, where he shares stories of his time leading an ACT team in Chicago. His stories shed light on the basic human need, which is connection. We'll be right back in a couple minutes. Welcome to Hopeology, stories of hope, healing, and resilience. I'm your host, Christina McKelvey. Today, we're going to be speaking with Zak Mucha. He's a social worker and a psychoanalyst, and also the president of the Chicago Center for Psychoanalysts. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. And I realized that I butchered the school's name because I always butcher psychoanalyst, psychoanalysis. I always get those two confused, and I am a psychotherapist, so you think I shouldn't. But here we are.
You should hear the words I butcher.
So thank you so much for, coming on to Hopeology. I looked through your book, Swimming to the Horizon, and it's fascinating, just the different stories that you share about, working as, the supervisor for your ACT program in Chicago. And I just, I found a lot of them really inspiring, some of them sad, and I just thought that, again, with my podcast being about hope, it would be really great to dig into this. And so thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. So let's start off with, just telling my listeners a little bit about yourself and a short synopsis of your book, Swimming to the Horizon.
Okay. Short synopsis of the book is I ran an ACT team, Assertive Community Treatment team, which I don't imagine a lot of people know what that is. It's in a community mental health program where the ACT program is for all of, and I'm going to go back and forth between clients and patients because back then it was clients and now I use the word patients. But back then all the clients were suffering severe psychosis, substance abuse issues, homelessness, multiple incarcerations, hospitalizations, extreme poverty, people who had really been, burned or let down by the mental health system and also by the society around them, including families. The people we were working with had no social supports at all. So our team really was, we were 24/7 wraparound services. The idea of assertive community treatment was we'd be like a hospital unit that ran around the neighborhood because our patients were not going to be coming in for appointments. So we were responsible for helping people get housing, benefits, meds, food, going to court, hospitalizing people, every medical issue. And we had our own psychiatrist, our own nurse, our own therapist, our own case managers, peer specialists, substance abuse specialists. And everyone had a caseload and everyone, a lot of our work was done outside of the office, which is part of the title of the book, because a lot of our work was done in the street or in, SROs or flop house hotels.
What are SROs? I'm sorry.
Single resident occupancy.
Okay.
Where they, the rent is, just under what a benefit check, what someone would get for their SSDI. So, back then, you get $700 a month, and the rent would be 550, 560. Then you're supposed to live off the rest of that, plus whatever you might get off your link card, which, is not enough to live off of. So a lot of people, have to commit petty crimes just to survive. And so there was a lot of what we were dealing with. In the neighborhood we're in, Uptown, Edgewater, in recent years it's gotten very gentrified. All this housing has disappeared. I don't know where people have gone to.
Mm.
But it was really, there were flop house hotels, which is a non-clinical name for them,
Mm-hmm.
all over the neighborhood. And there was one called the Wilson's Men's Club, which was literally like a 9 by 12 cubicle with a bare light bulb hanging through the chicken wire ceiling. And it's just a shared bathroom on every floor. It's a very dangerous place to live.
Mm.
So this is what our team was doing, and our job was to keep people safe in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And was it centered just on that particular neighborhood, or did you go into, other neighborhoods within Chicago?
We were mostly in this neighborhood just because this was our area. Every once in a while, we would have to go out, or I would have to leave the neighborhood to go do an intake assessment. Part of my job was going to hospitals and convincing someone on the unit to work with our team.
Okay. And I imagine, being in the same neighborhood, you start really establishing relationships and seeing the same individuals and seeing their growth or demise, depending on what direction they chose. And some of the stories, and I know the names are changed, right? And so when I mention names, they're changed. They're not, actual names of the patients, clients that you saw. But there's just stories about Manny, Bobby, Leonard. Those were some of the ones that stuck out. Charles, that one was.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to, and I forget that my audience, my listeners can't see me, but when I mentioned Charles, my heart broke because of that story. So I don't know if there's any particular ones you want to kind of delve into and share, that maybe impacted you the most, or, that.
I'll talk about
Yeah.
Charles because he
Mm-hmm.
he truly was heartbreaking,
Yeah.
and he was infuriating, and
Mm.
and people really, you know, true ambivalence, loved and hated him at the same time.
Mm.
He was a former NGRI client, not guilty by reason of insanity. He had committed some real violence in the past, which he wasn't a violent person. But by the time we got him, he was throughout schizophrenic, but he was also, very addicted to crack. He was HIV positive. He was a chronic shoplifter. And but he was also really brilliant at teaching new staff. And when I first took over the team, the original staff, it was very much meds and money. That was it. Because the agency was the payee for a lot of our clients because the state had deemed them too quote unquote disabled, unable to handle their own finances, which is not untrue. So the state, assigned the agency to be the payee, which meant we would take care of the rent, bills, and also have to dole out that little bit of money that was left throughout the week. Well, Charles had a fierce addiction, and his money was very important to him. But the staff, that I inherited was very much this compliance model, which is really, really ugly. And it is not about, the independence and
Mm.
subjectivity of a person. It's you take your meds, you get your money.
Not very person-centered either, it sounds like.
No, it was
Yeah.
compliance. Compliance always crumbles.
Mm.
If we had an audience in front of us, I would ask, raise your hand if you like being told what to do. And Charles was brilliant at, I remember, you know, when I started hiring my own staff, a young woman was learning. And I was telling her, do not tie meds to money. I
Mm. Mm-hmm.
just throughout the team and throughout the years, if someone takes their meds, that's not as important as building a relationship with that patient. And we had to build a relationship. They had to be able to trust us. We had to be able to do what we say we're going to do. And, and it was, that was the only way anyone might have a reason to listen to anything you have to say as a therapist or case manager, that you had earned that trust. No one could say, we could never say, trust me, because that doesn't do anything. It's just another instruction. But this young clinician was, working with Charles. Charles was incredibly street smart. He was brilliant. And, she's saying, oh, take your meds and I'll give you your money. He says,
One thing you
no.
told her not to do.
Yeah. And he said, no, give me my money, then I'll take my meds. And she said, no, it's the other way around. And they went back and forth like Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd until he finally said, I have AIDS. You're withholding my medication. You're killing me. And of course she, crumbled right there. And, he walked out.
Mm-hmm.
It was very much a power play, and he knew how to switch it around on her.
Yeah.
But Charles, I mean, he was an amazing survivor.
Mm. Those skills, like you mentioned, he was very street smart.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of growth did you see? Because when I was reading his story, it sounded like there was a lot of ebbs and flows with his growth.
Sure. I mean, a lot of our clients, I mean, we weren't going to be sending people to college.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were truly trying to keep people housed. And we had to track progress. With a lot of people, we could say, okay, this person was hospitalized less this year than he was last year. And, he only got evicted once this year rather than 3 times last year. And progress would be, having some stability, some safety, in the community. Progress would be building relationships.
Yeah, you say in chapter 22 that ACT was designed to be a campaign of full press, intensive services aimed at clients who faced steep recovery challenges and were almost certain to progress slowly, if at all.
Yeah. And even the bureaucratic requirements of ACT, just the full fidelity ACT, because we'd be audited every year.
Mm-hmm.
The requirements even said, one clinician should not be seeing the same client every day. Like if Charles is a client,
Mm-hmm.
I would see him on Monday, this person see him on Tuesday, another person see him on Wednesday. And the official reasoning from the state was that, well, we don't want them to get attached to anyone. And I disagreed with that.
Yeah.
And I we really built the team so that, like, if you were a clinician, you would have a caseload of, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people that you were their connection to the world.
Mm-hmm.
You were the person they had to rely on. You were the person they saw every day. I mean, because we have to have those relationships. I mean, this is where, what we were doing was very psychodynamic. The relationship is everything. I mean,
yes.
that's the only thing that was where we saw progress, when someone actually, was able to start making relationships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that relationship, and I had it marked, but for Charles, it
Mm-hmm.
sounded like it was that he acknowledged there's a part where it says that, like, he was talking to someone, that's when he realized he was dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that realization came because of that relationship. I'm trying to find this particular, I had it marked, scene.
Hmm.
I don't know if you recall, or of course you do, you wrote the book, but there was a part where it says, and then he realized he was dying, and that support he got from his clinician and the team was probably huge, especially during that time. And didn't he also moved from the street to jail in the last parts of his life?
Yeah, it was a real shame. I mean, it was
Yeah.
for everything the guy had done. A judge got him for just chronic shoplifting. He had so many shoplifting arrests,
Mm,
and he was very sick when he went into jail. But even before that, he was in a hospital, a medical hospital,
hmm
the medical unit, which, unlike the psychiatric unit, you have a phone at your bed. So Charles was calling our office every 2 minutes, 10 minutes,
hmm
and you could just see the phones lighting up around the room with him calling and demanding a beef sandwich or a combo, fries, and someone had to bring him something.
Sounds like he was trying to connect in some way, in his own
Sure,
way, right?
sure, yeah, yeah, and it was infuriating, but this was also how he connected.
Yeah. And like you said at the beginning, your work within ACT was infuriating, but also, you know, inspiring. I don't think that's the word you used, but it was both of those
But
going.
it was. I mean, we talk about hope. I mean, it was always stunning to me how much people do want to live. I
Mm,
mean, how much. I mean, there are very few suicides, which was amazing,
yeah.
and that people. It's amazing what we can suffer through with the idea of all right, there's something I want on the other side of this. I had some brilliant clinicians on the team. One guy was there more than him, but there are some people who are so amazingly dedicated. And when we built this team, it was we created a lot of stuff just because the agency wasn't really
hmm
too concerned. I mean, about what we were doing. We were making money for them. ACT reimburses at a high rate.
Oh, so
But we
that's
were,
okay.
I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was saying so they weren't concerned, but they were in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Mm,
they gave us room to create a lot. And
okay.
we had our own clothing closet. We had a food pantry. We had one therapist actually convinced the city gym in the neighborhood to give free memberships to his caseload, and he was marching his guys up Broadway into the gym. It was great, and it took months and months and months, but we actually truly saw a difference in just you know people were able to what the Thorazine shuffle is, just the sort of disconnection to your own body, which
hmm
is part of meds and part of symptoms. He was able to actually start combating that. We could see guys walking
hmm
very much with a purpose and walking with an awareness of their bodies. It was amazing. And
Yeah.
we had that. We created emergency apartments because we were dealing with a lot of homelessness.
hmm
And I convinced, one landlord if I could raise the money for 2 apartments for a year, just give them to me, let me use them. I'll move people in as I need to. And you don't do any background checks that are going to take 3 to 5 days. If I'm pulling someone off the street, where am I going to put them while we're waiting for a background check? And we needed a place where they wouldn't have to pay rent for the first couple months while we get their benefits started and all that. So I told the landlord, and we threw parties and raised the money. But I told the landlord, I thought I was being really magnanimous. I told him, I promise you no murderers. And he said, I don't care about that. I don't want any arsonists. You know,
It's a good point.
but that's a landlord. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, arsonists would not be a good thing for sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of housing, as I was reading this book, and I even had it, I have a note next to it, food and housing come first, and I put Maslow's. So I'm curious, how does Maslow's hierarchy of needs play into the work you did, or did it? Did you see how what Maslow spoke about, like what you need as the base and moving on up? Did you see that working in action, or what did that look like?
Oh, totally. I mean, housing, that was why we had the emergency apartment. I mean,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
housing comes first. It's impossible to do anything if someone does not feel safe. Just it's like the homeless shelters. It's really a dangerous thing. If you're being prescribed heavy antipsychotic meds,
Mm-hmm.
it's really a dangerous thing to go to a homeless shelter because those meds will, if you take them, they'll knock you out. You're near unconscious. If you do that in a homeless shelter, you're going to wake up with all your stuff gone at the very best,
Mm.
you know? So, safe housing is such an important thing. It's still is. So that was always a fight to have housing for our people. And, I remember when we had one man who was a cab driver, but his symptoms, his hallucinations, delusions were so severe. He would be driving a cab, but he would hear someone saying horrible things about him, and he thought it would be the fare in the back seat, and he would pull over and get violent. I
Mm.
mean, something terrible was going to happen, but he had these very real delusions that there was literally someone fused to his back, coming out of his back and yelling at him and excoriating, just really ugly, ugly
Mm-hmm.
commentary about him just 24/7. And he couldn't keep driving a cab. He was gonna hurt someone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I when we had petty cash and subsidies for not apartments, hotel rooms, I made a deal with him that we'll get you, because he was sleeping in the alley behind the cab stand. He had nowhere to stay. And I said, all right, I'll put you in a room. I'll get you a place, your own bed, your own bathroom. But like any apartment, I need a deposit. You'll get it back when you have your own place.
Mm-hmm.
So he gave up his cabbie license for as a deposit on his apartment, which is
Mm.
great, which meant he wasn't gonna kill someone driving. And this is we had it was a lot of on the fly problem solving
Mm-hmm. Well, it
with
sounds. Mm-hmm.
go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say it sounds like the shelter was more important than the income for him at that moment, and that kind of proves Maslow's needs.
Yeah, the income was not doing anything for him. Yeah, he
Yeah.
needed to be somewhere where he could rest. 'Cause sleeping in the alleys, it's
Mm.
not good for psychotic symptoms.
Mm-hmm. And did you notice that once the base need of, food, water, shelter, like when that was met, were they able to climb the rung to the next need and then so forth?
And yeah, but the rungs were very close together. And it
Mm,
wasn't it
mm-hmm.
wasn't huge progress. And there was progress, but it was hard. It was a lot of these are people who had been years and years without real, you know, without real intense care, without any support systems. I mean, some of the staff, I don't know if you remember the case of LaFleur, but the case manager that was working with him, literally, had to show him how to wash his feet, how to, it was,
Mm,
you talk about, a lot of talk about Christianity. And I'm not religious in that way, but this was truly compassionate work this
yeah.
therapist was doing. Going there, showing them how to clean the toilet, how to clean the tub, how to wash your feet. Just stuff that this man
Mm,
had not done in years and years and years. there are several points where we would have to go to Home Depot and buy full-on disposable hazmat suits just to clean someone's room when we start with them, because it would just horribly, and just inhuman conditions people are living in.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be often the place we would start.
Yeah. Mm. And seeing that day after day, I mean, I can imagine that can kind of do something with one's beliefs or outlook. Like how would a clinician, case manager, social worker, like how what would you recommend that, especially those that might be working in ACT programs, can where do they find their strength, I guess is the question, and how to move forward and see the hope in their work.
Mhm. Well, it's like the title of the book itself, right? Swimming to the horizon. If you give it a thought for a moment, it's not even a hopeful vision, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
swimming to the horizon, we're not going to make it.
That
And
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, and it's from a conversation I had with a really amazing therapist she was working too hard, and just literally staying way too late, typing up notes long after everyone's gone, and we were on call 24/7, but still, and I think at one point I literally did have to threaten to unplug her computer while she was typing. She wouldn't go home. And she was very upset because there was always more to do. I mean, every day you'd come in and there'd be something else that fell apart. Someone else who was in trouble, someone else, threw their meds out, someone got arrested, whatever. There was always something new to take care of. And I was telling her, she was very upset, in my office. And I said, we are not going to cure psychosis. And we are swimming to the horizon. Our job is to help our patients, move their lives forward in these little bits. And I think the valuable part was for you know the staff who were energized by the work were the ones who valued the relationship themselves. You know,
Mm-hmm.
one thing, this is a little bit of a sidebar, but not terribly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we were first setting up in our offices, I had a buddy paint a big banner for the team, and it said, "If you can't be counted on, you can't be counted in."
You can't be counted on, you cannot be counted in.
Yeah, like
Mm.
we are a unit. We have to support each other as as coworkers. This wasn't everyone. It was a big team office. Everyone had to be able to support each other. Everyone had to be able to back someone else up.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm hospitalizing someone, I need someone. I may need someone to come with, or at least someone to watch my back while it's happening. Because we were in a lot of not safe situations,
Yeah.
or just we had to. If someone couldn't get to patient Mary for her doctor's appointment, someone else had to grab it and take care of Mary.
Mm-hmm.
We had to support each other in supporting our patients. And the banner was a good litmus test, because if a staff member was annoyed by that thought, it told me a lot about them,
Mm-hmm.
that they didn't want to be counted on and didn't care about being counted in. But with this, I mean, and those also often were not the clinicians who were energized by or valued, the relationship with the client.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard work. I often think of, and I wasn't thinking of this back then because I didn't know of Emmanuel Levinas, the philosopher, who lost his entire family in the Holocaust. And I think of his work about you know our responsibility, irreducible responsibility to the other,
Mm-hmm.
that we have to be responsible. Basic rule: do not kill the other person, and so that we have the responsibility to not look away from this sort of devastation. We have to acknowledge it. We have to step in and do something. And I think, the people who really, on the people on the team who really love this work, I mean, I think they just inherently had that sense that we just have an inherent duty to other people.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, the humanist.
Yeah.
Humans. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just and stepping in, because we're dealing with, severe psychosis. And it's very scary. It's scary to, you know, try to figure out what is this person talking about. And over time we would see that, all right, a lot of these symptoms were about their trauma histories. We could rarely get like a full intake out of someone, a full social history, just because the disorganization was so great. But over time, we would see, all right, the narrative of the symptoms would hold a lot of pieces of very traumatic past, traumatic childhood, and a traumatic adulthood. I mean, one guy who I really, really love this guy. The only way he would work with me was if I could step into sort of half a delusion he had that we were like cops working together in a buddy movie. And I don't know if you remember him from the book, but during the intake interview, he would do nothing but scream at me. I'm Steven Skull, you're Bruce Willis. Remember when I kicked you the gun when they kidnapped your daughter? And, it was all this very hyper masculine
Yeah.
stuff. But okay, there's something he needs to prove in this. And I can't. What's the point of reality testing? My job is to get him housed and safe in the neighborhood. So, we'd have to drive around the neighborhood because he got evicted from places a lot.
Mm.
He was deeply offensive and, threatening to a lot of people. But he was able to work with me because I wasn't challenging. It's like, all right, I didn't say I was Bruce Willis, but I just went on and it's all right, this is what we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the way he could conceptualize the relationship, so it was acceptable to him.
Yeah.
And we kept him safe in the neighborhood as much as we could.
Yeah. Mm. There's there's so many, just lovely, like, and I'm using the term lovely stories, even though it was hard work and grueling work. And I highlighted this part. I did, however, understand the therapeutic aspects of work. Some of us are like dogs. We need responsibility, something to do, something to define our value and purpose. But not all job searches were therapeutic, especially when the odds of success were frustratingly minimal. And I'm connecting that to, like, with the houses. You mentioned, you were getting him housing and he continued to get evicted, getting individuals jobs, and maybe they were continuing to lose those jobs. But the big thing is that they needed to have value and purpose. And that's what you're also helping. And I know that, again, back to Maslow's needs, that's like, I don't have it pulled up, but I think it's like 3 or 4, but I actually kind of think it runs up and down the side of the triangle. For those of
Mhm.
you that don't know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a triangle, and there's the basis: food, water, and shelter. But having that value and purpose and hope, I think, goes back and forth. And when you have that hope, you have that purpose and value, you want to move forward. And it sounds like that's what you guys were doing, despite knowing, like, this individual may not hold this job for long or may not have this house for long, but we're going to keep getting them those resources.
Yes. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. The idea of having a purpose
Mm-hmm.
is a life-saving thing. Whether you're at this level of, severe mental illness or, any patient who comes into your office. I mean, you could see that sort of without a sense of real purpose in the world, how depressing and disheartening it could be. And yeah, that even because it defines us, right? Even to have a terrible job. And I've done it before. I went to social work school a little later and much later in life.
Hmm.
So I had a lot of, rough jobs that I did not like, but I could at least define myself by saying, I hate this job. This is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. And that defines us as much as a job we love.
Hmm.
So, and that's also a big part of the work. And it was a part of, building relationships with patients because, you know, we were having, we did have the 50-minute hours with our patients. And this crowd was deserving of therapy as anyone else.
Yeah.
And therapy should not be only for middle class and up. And just to have that. And one thing we would talk about is what any patient, no matter who or where they were, in the team, everyone needed to feel safe and be heard. They needed,
Hmm.
actually have what they're saying be taken in.
Yeah. Be safe and be heard. Mm. Right.
Even when there was violence in the office and I would have to intervene. I remember having someone and we ended up on the floor, but I remember telling him, no one here is going to hurt you, and I'm not going to allow you to hurt anyone else either. And
Hmm.
that was like the basic rule for when people are in the office.
Yeah. Mm. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you either. Because a lot of times individuals are fighting because they're feeling threatened and they're not feeling safe. And
Totally,
so
totally.
sharing them. Yeah.
It was all affective violence rather than predatory violence.
Right.
Affective violence is just y'all get away from me so I don't hurt anyone.
Hmm. Hmm.
It, to in order to feel safe.
Yeah. Oh, well, Zach, we're gonna switch to the Instagram live portion.
Okay.
But before we do, I wanna, just in case it doesn't transfer over, because I'm gonna try and somehow record the Instagram live session.
Sure.
Um, but I wanted to ask before we switch over, I asked this question to everybody that's on my show. What brings you hope? What gives you hope?
Brings me hope is, um, I think that I've, back then doing that work and now I'm a therapist in private practice. I just, right, I have seen people do amazing things, make real changes.
Mhm.
I have seen people just sort of come to life. And just personally, stuff that gives me hope is, God, poetry. And it's just such an amazing thing. Reading
Mhm.
books are always hopeful. I'm never going to get through everything I want to read in life. And and I think I said this to you before, and also one thing that's been very hopeful for me is, and this is totally counterintuitive and paradoxical, but that's how it is. But like Zen Buddhism, a practice in Zen Buddhism, which is
Mhm.
the one thing I've gotten out of all of that is to see that, all right, my own thoughts are not that important.
Yeah.
Everything I worry about, it's me doing it to myself. And it's just this very strange way to find hope in how horrible everything is. Even like we were talking about today, you know, we are before we start, we were talking about the weather. And I'm in Chicago and it's the end of February and it's 70 degrees, which is not how it's supposed to be in Chicago
Right.
in February. This is supposed to be when we're all depressed and miserable. And it's a lovely day, but it's also, a horrible sign for the climate. It's like
Yeah.
we're taking out a payday loan on the planet. And it's, you know, it's about, this awfulness at the same time as, all right, it's also lovely.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of, like you're describing the book, it's not, it's very, ton of very sad stories, but there's also a lot of joy in those little bits of interactions. I mean, some of these people had an amazing, clients and staff, an amazing sense of gallows humor that got us through this.
Mhm.
Remember, I was training a new staffer at one point, and we're working with a man who had really severe delusions and hallucinations. And I'm trying to teach a young staffer, all right, how to respond differently between delusions or hallucinations. Hallucinations, you can reality check. Delusions, you do not want to challenge because you end up part of the conspiracy. And we see that with, American politics right now. So this man is being chased by an entire family
Mhm.
that are delusional. And we're in a room somewhere, and he's saying, can you, I could hear, they're pounding on the door right now. He's yelling. And I said, responding to the delusion, something like, you don't get a moment's rest. These people are always after you. You can never relax. He said, that's right. I said, but I got to tell you, I don't hear anyone pounding on the door. What do you think that means?
Mm.
And he said, well, it means one of us is fucked up. And all right, he had a little bit of awareness there. It was good.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. It's that hope within the darkness.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly.
Yeah.
You summarized me going on endlessly perfectly.
Well, Zach, let's switch to Instagram Live, and I'm gonna pause.
Okay.
All right. Well, I don't know if I'm gonna have this in the podcast or not, but we tried to go live and it didn't work, but that's okay. So I'm gonna ask the questions for you to you that I was gonna ask live. And of
Okay.
course, if anyone has questions for Zach, if you were like, oh, I didn't get to meet you live, that's okay, because under my podcast on Spotify, you can provide feedback. You can send an email, send Zach an email through Instagram,
Mhm.
contact us if you have any questions or feedback. And I'll also put that in the little sorry note on Instagram that
Yeah.
so one of the other questions I had was, what did your experience, and this might be the only question to ask actually, working in that team teach you about resilience and healing?
I think the I one thing it really did about resilience and healing was that working with ACT, I saw that I had so much more to learn, and that and it's why I believe, why I ended up a psychoanalyst. I mean,
Mm,
you know, there was so much happening that I could not understand, and that's all right. Why, oh, just about symptoms, and that people were so resilient. I think it was, there was so much that I was not trained in. I mean, there was no psychoanalytic training. There's barely any supervision at all anyway. But I realized, all right, there's so much I don't know. There's so much happening here that I had a sense of something but I really had to go learn. And I started, you know, I started going to lectures at the Chicago Center for Psychoanalysis. And the
hmm.
first lecture I went to was a Lacanian lecture. I didn't even know who Lacan was. And I walked out of there so angry because I couldn't understand a damn thing that was said. But it sort of set me to, all right, this was like taking over the ACT team. I had no clue what I was doing. I had no business probably doing it, but there was literally no one else who wanted to run that team. I mean, I was promoted into supervising that team when I was maybe a few months out of social work school. It
Hmm.
wasn't because anyone recognized this amazing talent I had. It was that no one wanted to do this filthy, violent,
Oh.
thankless job. But I was willing to, because partly because I didn't know any better. And but that always fascinated me. That all right, there to walk into this thing where it was a total mystery and a total mess. And I think going from ACT into psychoanalysis has been very much a total shift in, perception of my own responsibilities. But in all of it, it's the same thing that is there, and it's the thing that keeps me hopeful, just how resilient people are,
Mm-hmm.
and how much potential there is for people to, keep growing. It's an amazing thing to find out, all right, I could do much more than I thought I could. I am much more than I thought I was.
Yeah. I am much more than I thought I was. I love that. And that's that hope. Hope breeds resilience or healing. Like it ties into each other. When you have hope, you can have that resilience and then you can heal.
Actually, I think it's, for me at least, I sort of see it the other way around. That resilience sort of breeds hope. Like,
Okay. I like
like
that.
to say, holy shit, I just survived this. Okay. I didn't think I would.
Okay.
That changes my own boundaries as a person. It changes my own self-definition. I can survive a thing that I did not think I could before.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I like that reframe. Yes. Yeah, that makes sense too. Well, Zak, thank you so much for, being on my podcast and, your flexibility of trying to figure out the Instagram live, but I will go live on Instagram in a minute and apologize to my three followers. But Zak, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you, and where can they find the book if they would like to buy the book, Swimming to the Horizon?
I'm very easy to find at my name, zakmucha.com, ZAKMUCHA.com. I'm easy to contact. My information is there. The book is wherever you buy books. You can get a copy of it.
All right.
And
Well,
yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you.
Thank you. This was fun. And all right, we tried Instagram. It didn't work. Big deal. If half the things I tried worked out, things would be very different. This is great.
Yes. Yeah. No, it was really fun. I definitely enjoyed it. And to everyone listening out there, continuing to strive for hope. And until next time. That was a great time. I urge you to check out his book. I have also provided links below on how you can contact him if you need to. I love that we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The foundation is security, but also connection with others, which is so important to healing. Thank you for joining us today. Again, his information is linked in the show notes, and I will see you in a couple weeks. Thank you for listening to Hopeology. If you enjoyed today's show, please leave us a review. To learn more about us or listen to past episodes, you can find us on all your podcast streaming stations. If you are interested in being a guest, or if you have any feedback, please email us at hopeologypodcast@gmail.com. You can also support our show by clicking on the link in our show notes. Please also follow our Instagram page, Hopeology Podcast, and visit our website, www.hopeologypodcast.com.